Dude, why was the only 5th generation robot ever built discarded as a mere workhorse? Official records show that it single-handedly annihilated 11 giant monsters. Today I'm going to prove to you why it was the most lethal machine ever created, and how humanity wasted its greatest asset. When you look at the Jaegers and the war against the Kaiju, Gipsy Danger ends up stealing all the attention. But the real gem of defense engineering wasn't him. It was Striker Eureka. It holds mechanical secrets that most people simply ignore. Now let's go to the video to find out everything. Watching the film again, we realize how unfair what they did to Striker Eureka was, and to be fair, I'll tell you everything from its creation. The year was 2019, and the Jaeger program was beginning to financially collapse. The UN and world leaders were tired of pouring billions and billions of dollars into giant robots because the creatures kept evolving. They thought the project had failed and started investing everything in building that gigantic coastal wall. The wall of life, as if a wall would be the salvation, right? So it was exactly in this scenario of despair and budget cuts that the Australian government, operating almost at the limit of its resources and defying global pessimism, finalized the construction of Striker Eureka. It cost $100 billion to make. Man, that's a lot of money. And no, it wasn't money wasted because it was classified as the first and only Mark V model. In other words, it represented the most advanced technological leap that the human mind managed to achieve in the entire war. All the flaws, the slowness, and the lack of mobility of previous generations, such as the Mark I and Mark II, were corrected in it. And I say all this because you need to keep in mind that the Striker wasn't just a metal soldier. It was a hunter designed to outrun its enemies. While most older Jaegers like Cherno Alpha were heavy, slow, and relied on enduring a lot of punishment to win, Striker changed the game with its dimensions. It was 103 meters tall, but weighed only 1,850 tons. And if you think about it, a robot of that size weighing only 1,850 tons is absurd. It would be made of styrofoam. But strangely enough, they released this information in the official art book Pacific Rim, Man, Machines, and Monsters, which contains the original technical specifications approved by Guillermo del Toro. The fact is that all this weight, or lack thereof, makes it the tallest Jaeger and, paradoxically, one of the lightest and most agile ever built. If we compare it to the volume of its body, it was made with extremely advanced titanium alloys and carbon fiber. Why is this important? Because it allowed its mobility to achieve a perfect 10 out of 10 rating in the official records of the Pan-Pacific Defense Corps. He was so fast that creatures often couldn't even keep up with his movements in the water or on land. You notice the difference in approach here. Humanity stopped trying to create giant shields and created a lethal spear, but ironically, that would be discarded by the very politicians who used it. The biggest headache in fighting these creatures has never been just killing the monster, but what happens afterward. Their blood, known as Kaiju Blue, is highly toxic. If you simply cut or blow up the creature in the middle of a city, the blood leaks out, contaminates the soil and water, and the entire city needs to be evacuated and abandoned. And that's where Striker Eureka's engineering shines. His main physical attack was punches, but not normal punches. His hands were designed with a steel and brass alloy called brass knuckles. These super dense metal knuckles were designed to inflict severe blunt force trauma. In other words, he would beat the monster, break its internal bones, and cause internal bleeding without breaking the creature's skin. You beat the enemy to the bone, but don't spill a drop of toxic blood in the city. If that's not great damage control, then I don't know what is. Okay, fine. I know that just punching doesn't solve everything. So if the situation got tough, he had thermal blades housed in his arms called sting blades. These weren't normal swords like Gipsy Dangers. They heated up to extreme temperatures before cutting, yes. The cut instantly cauterized the wound. Again, the total focus was on preventing the Kaiju Blue from leaking out. Everything in Striker was designed to protect Earth, not just to win the fight. And the main weapon, the true signature of this war machine, was in its chest. The WMB missile launcher, twice 90. It consisted of 6 tubes loaded with K-Stunner anti-monster warheads. These warheads were specifically developed to penetrate the thickest silicon-based scales and explode from the inside out. This arsenal transformed the Striker into the Jaeger, with the highest number of recorded victories in history. 11 creatures were taken down. The Gipsy Danger didn't reach that number in its first phase, and the Crimson Typhoon stopped at 7. The Striker Eureka was the true executioner of the ocean. For a machine to respond so quickly, the pilots need to have a virtually perfect mental connection. And this is where the human factor that made the Striker so feared comes in. Herc and Chuck Hansen, father and son. If you've read the graphic novel Tales from Year Zero, you know that the drift process requires you to share all your memories and emotions in fractions of a second. The stronger the emotional bond, the lower the latency between the human brain and the robot's mechanical movement. Chuck Hansen was extremely arrogant in the movie, and that bothers a lot of people. But I'll show you why he was like that. He was born and raised inside the Jaeger program. While you and I were playing in the street, his mind was being molded for war. He and his father had a near-perfect response time inside the control pod. Because the Striker was completely digital, the speed at which Chuck's thoughts transformed into a metal punch was almost zero. This efficiency fostered a superiority complex in Chuck. He knew he was piloting the only Mark V machine on the planet, and knew that statistically, no one came close to their success. His arrogance wasn't just a script-writing flaw, it was a realistic consequence of placing a young man under the pressure of carrying the survival of an entire country on his shoulders, knowing he had the best weapon in the world in his hands. The troubled relationship with his father concealed a deep loyalty within the Deriva, which allowed Striker Eureka to move with the agility of a lightweight fighter, even weighing nearly 2,000 tons. Now I want to remind you of a specific scene that perfectly illustrates everything I've said so far: the incident in Sydney. The United Nations had cancelled funding for Striker. They decided that the Wall of Life was the ultimate solution. And then the Mutavore appears, a Category 4 creature extremely aggressive. The Mutavore arrived on the Sydney coast and crossed the supposedly impenetrable wall of the United Nations as if it were made of paper. That was a cold shower for the world government. In a matter of seconds, the entire global strategy of hiding behind walls crumbled. Millions of lives were about to be extinguished. It is at this moment that Striker Eureka, which was being retired and taken out of operation, is activated. Striker doesn't hesitate. It doesn't try to grab or measure strength unnecessarily. It advances at full speed with the Mark V. It delivers a sequence of punches with the brass knuckles directly to the creature's skull to stun it. The Mutavore is disoriented by the impact on its central nervous system. Then, without wasting half a second, the Hansens activate the missiles on its chest. The barrage hits the target point blank. The creature goes to a better place right there. The entire combat lasted less time than it took the politicians to sign the spending cuts. Striker Eureka saved the entire city of Sydney without suffering a scratch, and proved to the whole world that the answer was not to hide, but to keep fighting. But even after this undeniable demonstration of superiority and lethal efficiency, the fate of this robot was already sealed by completely questionable tactical decisions. And this is where the waste I mentioned at the beginning of the video begins to take shape. I know you must be thinking, wow, Gabriel, but if it was so perfect, how was it defeated? And the answer lies in a technical detail of its construction and in the invader's own intelligence. The masters behind the creatures, the precursors, are not stupid animals acting on instinct. They have a hive mind. Every time a monster dies, they absorb the battle data. They learned how humans fought. They knew exactly what the biggest threat was on the chessboard. The Striker Eureka had a weakness that older models didn't. Being the pinnacle of technology, the Mark V, it was 100% digital and operated using advanced electrical systems. The Gipsy Danger, being an older Mark III, used an analog nuclear core. When the mission to defend Hong Kong began, the precursors sent two creatures, the Otachi and the Leatherback. The Leatherback wasn't just large, it was created in a laboratory by the aliens with a single purpose in mind: to disable humanity's technological advantage. The organ on Leatherback's back generated a massive electromagnetic pulse, an EMP. This fried Striker Eureka's digital circuits instantly, and here lies the tragedy of the project. All the speed, the $100 billion invested, the aerodynamics, the missiles on its chest, all of that was negated by a human design flaw. They built the most lethal warrior possible, but they didn't include shielding against electromagnetic pulses, a basic warfare technology. It was a strategic humiliation. The most expensive robot on Earth had to be saved by Gipsy Danger, an obsolete model that, by pure irony of fate, or script, let's be honest, continued to function because its nuclear reactor didn't depend on digital circuits to remain active. And now I'll get to the main point of our video, which is why the Striker Eureka was the most wasted machine in the entire film franchise and in all the written lore. And for that, I'm going to analyze the famous Operation Pitfall, the final mission to blow up the breach in the Mariana Trench. Marshal Pentecost's plan was to descend to the bottom of the ocean with 2 Jaegers and drop a thermonuclear bomb there. Striker Eureka, the fastest robot with the largest anti-monster arsenal ever built, the hunter specifically designed to destroy threats in seconds, was chosen to carry the bomb on its back. Can you see the absurd mistake in that decision? Instead of letting Gipsy Danger carry the payload while Striker was free to do what it did best, fight and annihilate its path? In other words, they chained the Pitbull. When they reached the depths of the Pacific Ocean, they came face to face with Scunner and the first Category 5 monster ever seen in history, Slattern. Slattern was a giant aquatic kaiju with triple tails, and even with Striker damaged, pilot Herc injured, and Marshal Pentecost piloting in an improvised manner, the machine still managed to fight. Striker cut Slattern's throat and almost ripped off Scunner's arms. Notice that even at a total disadvantage, dealing with the immense pressure of the seabed that reduced mobility, it was still causing massive damage. It was amazing, man. If the Striker had been operating hands-free, focused purely on attack without the worry of protecting a nuclear bomb on its back, I have no doubt it would have torn both creatures to shreds. The Mark V had more than enough response speed and armament to slice the Slattern before it even suffered that electrical damage from its tails. But the script demanded sacrifice, and the tactical decision took its toll. Because the robot's main weapons couldn't fire freely for fear of triggering the core in its back, Pentecost and Chuck had to detonate the bomb prematurely. They blew themselves up. They used a billion-dollar engineering marvel like a mere matchstick. The sacrifice was heroic, of course, paving the way for Gipsy Danger to finish the mission. But I can't deny that it was the biggest waste of military potential in the entire history of the Pacific Rim universe. Striker Eureka deserved one last clean battle. He deserved to show on screen why he was the only one in his class to be approved. He carried the weight of being Australia's final defender, eliminated more threats than any other pilot in history, and ended his days reduced to ashes, extinguished by the same suits who had doubted him from the start. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel. God bless you. Take care.